Chapter 1. Introduction to Nick and the Setting. The novel opens with Nick Carraway, the narrator, reflecting on advice his father gave him to reserve judgment. He explains his move from the Midwest to West Egg, Long Island, in the summer of 1922, seeking his fortune in the booming bond business. West Egg is portrayed as the new money district, characterized by its gaudy mansions and ostentatious displays of wealth, in contrast to the more established and aristocratic old money of East Egg. Nick's rented cottage is modest compared to the extravagant estates surrounding him. To his west lives his neighbor, the enigmatic Great Gatsby, whose mansion is a site of lavish weekly parties. To his east reside his wealthy cousin, Daisy Buchanan, and her powerful and athletic husband, Tom. Nick's initial impressions of this new environment are tinged with both fascination and a sense of moral unease. He visits Daisy and Tom in their opulent Georgian colonial mansion in East Egg. The atmosphere is one of languid wealth and underlying tension. Nick is reintroduced to Daisy, whom he hasn't seen in years, and meets Jordan Baker, a cynical and captivating professional golfer. During dinner, the conversation reveals the superficiality and boredom of the Buchanans' lives. Tom openly displays his casual arrogance and makes a subtly racist remark, highlighting the prevailing social prejudices of the time. Daisy appears flighty and discontented, hinting at a deeper unhappiness beneath her charming facade. Jordan confides in Nick that Tom is having an affair with a woman in the Valley of Ashes, a desolate industrial area between West Egg and New York City. This revelation introduces the theme of moral decay hidden beneath the glittering surface of the Roaring Twenties. As Nick returns home that night, he sees Gatsby standing alone on his lawn, gazing out at a green light across the bay. This image of Gatsby reaching towards the distant light becomes a powerful symbol of his yearning and the central mystery surrounding his character. Chapter 2. The Valley of Ashes and Myrtle Wilson. Nick accompanies Tom on a trip to the Valley of Ashes, a bleak and desolate landscape where the industrial waste of the city is dumped. This setting serves as a stark contrast to the opulence of the Eggs and symbolizes the moral and social decay that underlies the era's prosperity. They stop at a garage owned by George Wilson, a meek and spiritless man. Here, Nick is introduced to Myrtle Wilson, George's voluptuous and ambitious wife, who is Tom's mistress. Myrtle possesses a raw vitality and dreams of escaping her impoverished circumstances. Tom treats her with a possessive and condescending air, highlighting the power dynamics inherent in their affair. Tom, Nick, and Myrtle travel to a small apartment in New York City that Tom keeps for their rendezvous. They are joined by Myrtle's sister, Catherine, and a couple named McKee. The apartment becomes a scene of drunken revelry and vulgarity, a stark contrast to the polite society of East Egg. Nick finds himself both repulsed and fascinated by the unrestrained behavior. During the party, Myrtle becomes increasingly loud and boastful, eventually mentioning Daisy's name. Tom reacts violently, breaking Myrtle's nose as a brutal reminder of her place and his control. This incident reveals Tom's volatile temper and the casual cruelty with which he treats those he considers beneath him. Nick leaves the apartment feeling disgusted by the events he has witnessed, further solidifying his growing disillusionment with the moral landscape of his new surroundings. Chapter 3. Gatsby's Parties and the Rumors. Nick finally receives an invitation to one of Gatsby's legendary parties. He describes the extravagant spectacle of these weekly gatherings. Hundreds of guests arrive in a constant stream, indulging in copious amounts of alcohol, dancing, and superficial conversations. Gatsby himself remains a mysterious figure, rarely seen mingling with his guests and the subject of much speculation and rumor. Nick observes the guests, noting their shallow interactions and the pervasive sense of aimless hedonism. He hears various rumors about Gatsby's past, that he is a nephew or cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm, that he killed a Mun, or that he was an Oxford Mun. These rumors contribute to the aura of mystery and intrigue surrounding Gatsby. Nick eventually meets Gatsby, who is surprisingly young, handsome, and possesses a formal, almost theatrical charm. They strike up a conversation, and Nick is struck by Gatsby's elaborate politeness and his habit of calling everyone old sport. Over the summer, Nick becomes a regular attendee at Gatsby's parties and develops a casual acquaintance with his enigmatic host. Nick also begins a romantic relationship with Jordan Baker. He finds himself drawn to her cynical wit and independent spirit, although he recognizes her inherent dishonesty. Their relationship provides Nick with further insight into the careless and self-absorbed nature of the wealthy elite. Chapter 4: Gatsby's Confession and the Meeting with Daisy. One afternoon, Gatsby takes Nick to lunch in New York City. During the drive, Gatsby recounts a highly embellished version of his past, claiming to have been educated at Oxford, traveled extensively in Europe, and earned medals in the war. Nick finds these stories difficult to believe, sensing a carefully constructed facade. Gatsby then reveals the true reason behind his extravagant lifestyle and his move to West Egg. He is deeply in love with Daisy Buchanan and has orchestrated his life in the hope of winning her back. He explains that he and Daisy had a passionate romance 5 years prior, before he went off to war. He believes that his newfound wealth will impress Daisy and allow him to recapture their past. Gatsby enlists Nick's help in arranging a meeting with Daisy. Nick agrees, and a somewhat awkward tea party is planned at his cottage. Gatsby is incredibly nervous before Daisy's arrival, revealing the depth of his emotional investment in this reunion. When Daisy arrives, the initial meeting is tense and uncomfortable. Gatsby disappears and then dramatically re-enters, his nervousness palpable. However, as the afternoon progresses, the initial awkwardness gives way to a rekindling of their past affection. They talk, reminisce, and Gatsby proudly shows Daisy his magnificent mansion and his vast array of material possessions, hoping to impress her with his success. The green light across the bay, once a distant symbol of his longing, now seems almost within reach. Chapter 5: The Rekindled Romance and the Illusion of the Past. Gatsby and Daisy's romance is rekindled with an intensity fueled by years of longing and idealized memories. They begin meeting frequently at Nick's cottage, and Nick observes their interactions with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Gatsby is deeply infatuated with Daisy, viewing her as the embodiment of his dreams and aspirations. He has meticulously crafted an image of himself and his wealth to align with what he believes she desires. However, Nick perceives a fundamental flaw in Gatsby's vision. He is trying to recreate the past exactly as it was, failing to recognize that both Daisy and the circumstances of their lives have changed. Daisy is clearly moved by Gatsby's devotion and his success, but she also seems overwhelmed by the reality of their reunion. The past, which Gatsby has held onto so fiercely, proves to be more complex and less idyllic than he remembers. There are hints of her shallowness and her attachment to the security of her wealthy lifestyle with Tom. Chapter 6: The Truth About Gatsby's Past. The narrative shifts to reveal the true story of J. Gatsby's origins. His real name was James Gatz, and he came from a poor farming family in North Dakota. At the age of 17, he changed his name and embarked on a self-invented life, driven by ambition and a desire to escape his humble beginnings. His transformation began when he met the wealthy and elderly Dan Cody, a copper tycoon, on Lake Superior. Gatsby worked for Cody for 5 years, learning about wealth and social etiquette, and inheriting a significant sum of money, though he was ultimately cheated out of most of it. This experience solidified his ambition to become rich and powerful. The chapter also depicts a party at Gatsby's where Tom and some of his wealthy friends from East Egg make a brief and condescending appearance. They are unimpressed by Gatsby's nouveau riche lifestyle and his lack of social pedigree. This encounter highlights the fundamental differences between new money and old money and foreshadows the social barriers that Gatsby will continue to face. Nick reflects on Gatsby's idealized vision of Daisy, realizing that Gatsby has built his entire world around a dream that may not be attainable in reality. He sees the inherent tragedy in Gatsby's unwavering belief in the possibility of perfectly recreating the past. Chapter 7: The Confrontation and the Tragic Accident. The climax of the novel occurs during a tense and fateful afternoon in New York City. Gatsby, Daisy, Nick, Jordan, and Tom travel into the city on a sweltering hot day. Gatsby believes that this will be the day that Daisy finally leaves Tom for him. They take a suite at the Plaza Hotel, and the atmosphere is charged with unspoken tensions. Tom, sensing the growing intimacy between Gatsby and Daisy, confronts Gatsby about the source of his wealth. He reveals that Gatsby's fortune comes from illegal activities, specifically bootlegging and potentially other illicit dealings. This revelation shatters the carefully constructed image that Gatsby has presented. Daisy is deeply shaken by Tom's accusations and by the realization of the true nature of Gatsby's wealth. She is torn between her passionate feelings for Gatsby and the security and familiarity of her life with Tom. Ultimately, she cannot bring herself to definitively leave Tom, clinging to the stability of her established social world. As the group drives back to Long Island, a tragic accident occurs. Myrtle Wilson, having had a heated argument with her husband George, who has discovered her affair, runs out into the road and is struck and killed by Gatsby's car. Daisy was driving the car, but Gatsby takes the blame to protect her. The chapter ends with a sense of impending doom and the unraveling of Gatsby's carefully constructed world. Tom, despite his own infidelity, is consumed by righteous anger and begins to plot his revenge, while Gatsby waits anxiously, hoping that Daisy will still choose him. Chapter 8: The Aftermath and Gatsby's Death. The immediate aftermath of the accident is filled with confusion and grief. Nick spends the night talking to Gatsby, who recounts his past with Daisy in Louisville 5 years earlier, revealing the depth and sincerity of his love for her. He still believes that Daisy will call him, unaware of her true feelings and her decision to stay with Tom. George Wilson, distraught and consumed by grief over Myrtle's death, is led to believe by Tom that Gatsby was Myrtle's lover and the one who killed her. Fueled by a desperate need for vengeance, Wilson tracks down Gatsby at his mansion. Gatsby is in his swimming pool, enjoying the first swim of the season, still clinging to the hope of a future with Daisy. Wilson shoots and kills Gatsby before taking his own life. Nick discovers their bodies and is devastated by the tragic and senseless end to Gatsby's dream. Chapter 9: The Funeral and the Final Reflections. The final chapter deals with the aftermath of Gatsby's death and Nick's reflections on the events of the summer. The funeral is a small and pathetic affair, attended only by Nick, Gatsby's father, who arrives from the Midwest, and allies, a man Nick met at one of Gatsby's parties who recognizes the sincerity of Gatsby's extensive library, though the books were unread. Daisy and Tom do not attend, having left town without leaving a forwarding address, demonstrating their callous indifference to Gatsby's fate. Nick is disgusted by the moral corruption and superficiality of the wealthy elite, who used Gatsby for his parties and then abandoned him in his time of need. He decides to return to the Midwest, feeling disillusioned with the East. In his final reflections, Nick contemplates Gatsby's dream and the corrupting influence of wealth and the past. He sees Gatsby as a symbol of the American dream, albeit a flawed and ultimately tragic one. Gatsby's unwavering belief in the possibility of recreating the past and his pursuit of an idealized version of Daisy ultimately led to his downfall. Nick concludes that Gatsby's dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him. The green light across the bay, which once symbolized Gatsby's hopes, now represents the unattainable past and the illusion of the American dream in a society obsessed with wealth and status. The novel ends with Nick's poignant reflection on how we all strive to move forward while constantly being pulled back by the currents of the past.